Hi, everyone. I'm Sonia Gavankar, creative studio contributor for Morning Brew, and I'm so excited to be here with Luck Dookchitra, VP of People at Leapsome. Thanks for being here, Luck.
Thanks so much for having me, Sonia. Big fan.
In the past few years, we've seen some major shifts in the way that we all work, from the pandemic to more diversified new workforce to the rise of generative AI. Looking at it from an HR standpoint, how have modern HR platforms evolved in response to the challenging and changes posed by the pandemic and the rise of generative AI technology?
Great question, and kind of a great summary, I think, of what has been happening with the world over the last 4+ years, even beyond. Great question. I do think HR tech has actually put us in a better position to handle more changes for the future of work. Why do I say this? I think when you used to think about HR, you would think about more antiquated systems, probably things like paper and documents that are a little bit more old school. I think HR tech and HR tech platforms have actually advanced us in a way that is more in tune with how modern people work. So a lot of it is data. A lot of it is we've become working hybrid. And so in doing all that, we need systems that connect better. And I think the HR platforms are more than just payroll and more than just kind of your transactional things now. They're actually thinking with you. And I think including Gen AI and all of these things really make these platforms smart and smart for smart people in the modern workforce. And so I think it's come a long way. There's still a lot more to do, but we see this in the rise of the CHRO role, taking a bigger seat on the C-suite and working more closely with CEOs and founders. And you see that with, I think I was at a talk with some folks from LinkedIn, and they're actually seeing more people kind of climb to that seat now. And I'm seeing more CHROs and CPOs take over for COO roles and things like that. So the role is definitely expanded. And I think a lot of that has happened because of all of the changes to work, especially with the pandemic, et cetera. And so I think this means that you become more of a strategic partner from this side, and we become the buyers of this technology. And so therefore, as consumers of this technology, we're really pushing engineers and CTOs to really think about how do people really work in the modern day, and what kinds of ways can we help their days be a little bit easier. So I do think we've moved forward in big strides in the last few years.
Can you share some examples of how these platforms have been instrumental in helping organizations adapt to the new normal?
Absolutely. I mean, I think without things like Zoom and other things in recent years, I don't know if we could have the workforce that we have now. But even in the HR tech itself, because we're working more remotely, you can record things online. So you can have a shared meetings with your manager and kind of keep track of things. So you don't have to follow up an email and find things. They're all laid out for you in the same system. You're much more able to connect with other systems like Slack and things where things are integrated on the back end. And so however your workforce is communicating, that can link into your systems. I feel like the HR tech platforms have become sort of like the operating system of how companies collaborate and communicate. And with Gen AI and those tools that we're infusing into how it works, the data is reading better, like you can connect the pieces a little bit more. So it actually feels like a connected community and things that are talking to each other versus going from one platform to another platform to another platform that aren't speaking, and it creates this like additional workload for you. I think HR tech plus all the advancements and all these other building block technologies can really help us make the workday smoother and more efficient and more connected, actually.
And adapting to a new normal can also be pretty costly. In a time of budget constraints, how can HR leaders leverage modern people platforms to maximize efficiency and manage more with less?
Great question, because I remember kind of Frankensteining lots of technology together over my career. And now I think what's great is the companies care about a broader mission. And so making sure that they're building things that folks use in their modern tech stack. So nowadays, if you can find tools where you can do more with what it does, and if it has strong data analysis and if it's friendly with other tech stacks, I think that is what you need to do, because as we all know, as HR teams are losing budget, depending on market conditions, et cetera, you do want to kind of minimize the cost and all of those different options, but also you want to make sure that they work so that the tools are actually doing what you need them to do. and that they're giving you the data you need, which is really how HR leaders can make a broader impact in terms of sharing, their value to the company.
So what specific features or functions in these platforms are most beneficial for handling those tight budgets?
Well, I do think it's the data and the connectivity. And so if the systems and modules can speak to each other and pull from the same data source, I think you already have saved a lot of steps. A lot of HR teams that I've worked at have been really small. You don't have as many resources. And so some of the time you're spending pulling the data into an analysis and then taking it offline and doing something, you might get distracted by something else. If the tool and platform can actually pull that together for you, give you a summary, you'll still have to play around with it and partner with it. But if you can do that, that's going to save you a lot of time, a lot of money. And hopefully all of those pieces are connected. And so you're not trying to kind of go in and having to change all the data pieces again. So the more it can be tight in the system and connect the pieces from your manager conversation to your engagement survey to your performance review, that makes it a lot easier for managers as well to be able to have that one-on-one with you, bring all the data to the forefront, not miss a beat. Same with you. You can pull up things from what you've done, and it's all connected in one seamless interaction.
That's really great. Sometimes we just have to hear it to know that it's the truth. These platforms are also helpful for meeting the needs of your people. With the addition of a younger, more diverse workforce, what role do modern HR platforms play in supporting inclusivity and diversity? And can these platforms help HR professionals better understand and address the needs and expectations of a multi-generational workforce?
Great question, and I'm glad you're asking it. I definitely do think you can. So I think there's a lot of complicated and more complex things that HR systems can do, but they can also do the simple things like making sure that you feel welcome and included in your organization. And I found that often when you're onboarding someone and you have to identify your gender and all of this and your name, if the system isn't letting you do that in the right way, you already don't feel included. And so I found in some older systems, because it's just built the way they were built from the past, and so you couldn't really do it. You kind of had to hack your way around it. Nowadays, HR tech firms are thinking about this because their workforces look like that. And so we don't have to go back and say, hey, can you change this to say, this pronoun, or can you change it to be this name? And I feel like that's one easy, important step that HR tech companies need to really think about. Like, how do you make sure from the onboarding experience till the offboarding experience, that person feels like they're part of the company. So I think in that way, it's super important. And then in terms of the multi-generational workforce, I think it brings everything together. Because again, if you go back to the data and look at folks and you look at the engagement data, you can actually see what people are saying. You can put a survey together that maybe, hey, self-identify what you look like. I think the difficulty with DEI efforts and things like that, sometimes you don't have all the data because you're not really supposed to collect that data. But if you can, in a way that feels safe for the employee, then HR teams can actually take a look at that and say, hey, what are the needs from our workforce? How are people working? And then the more advancements we get with AI and other tools, I do feel like you can use that data to then say, okay, this is what we're seeing with this workforce. This is the utilization we're seeing across these different modules, and let's ask about why. So it helps us to actually ask the true root cause questions, and then really deliver programs that make sense.
You brought up AI. And how does generative AI technology being integrated into modern HR platforms, and what impact does this have on HR operations and decision making?
A lot, I would say. So I would say on the decision-making side, I think it's that if you can get the right data. So I think the first step with Gen AI is that you need to make sure that the right data is in there. And I think if you have a great system where you can actually pull things together, and I think that's step number one that we forget about, is making sure that the data that you're feeding the machine is actually accurate, because then it can give you the right reports. And then from there, I do believe that if you have the right reporting and you have the right analysis, then you can actually do deeper thinking about what needs to happen, and you can kind of plan longer term. So workforce planning, like sentiment of the organization, you can keep tabs on those things in a better way. I think the struggle with HR teams getting AI into the forefront is at first we might not have the clear data. We might have too many documents. We might have systems that are sort of not speaking to each other. So I think part of it is taking a pre-planned step to say, okay, what do we want this machine to do? What do we want? How can we, use this to elevate how we work? Because again, I think we don't think AI is going to replace folks, but I do think it can augment what we do and how we do it. But you have to be intentional about what you want it to do and like know what those guardrails are. So I do think it will pay off to have these systems, because I think you can find ways to make sure that your team isn't working on the kind of maybe administrative tasks and instead higher level work. But you can do that by figuring out what the system is, training the AI to do those things for you. For instance, something like a help desk, right? So instead of having my HR generalist answer all the questions, you can actually train the AI to help take that first line of questioning, freeing up that generalist to do higher level thinking, org design, whatever it may be. And so I think it can really pay off once you kind of work with it and understand what you're trying to build.
Okay, look, let's look into the future. What kind of trends do you foresee in HR technology and people platforms that HR leaders should be aware of?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really exciting things happening in HR tech, especially with these building blocks of AI and other tools. And also because HR is now more at the forefront of what employees are asking for more from, as well as the business. And so things like having your own coach. I think some of the tools will actually start, there might be a bot or an agent that's going to help you do that, and help you think through things and being a thought partner. I think things like the connectivity amongst the data in terms of like what you're saying to your manager versus what you're saying in your one-on-ones and what you've delivered in your goals can become more seamless, and you can have that conversation be clearer. I think folks are saying that it's not as, even though managers believe that they're giving feedback, they're not getting quite enough, right? And so, so I think these tools will help connect the dots a little bit more for folks, and you'll be able to have kind of something written to remind you or something that reminds you. So I think HR tools will continue to get smarter, but also like collaborate more with humans, while also kind of running in the background and allowing you to lift up and do more of the core work that you enjoy.
Look, I really enjoy how much you love data, and I understand that Leapsome has a report coming out very soon. Can you give us a little bit of a sneak peek of what we'll learn in that report?
Absolutely, yeah. And I love, all this whole conversation has been a lot of validation, I guess, for some of the trends that we're seeing. So very excited that this will be coming out. It's our 2024 workforce report, coming out in October. But things that we were just talking about, for instance, managers giving feedback. I think we saw one trend, which we'll dig deeper into the report, but they're overestimating how much they're actually feedbacking to their employees. And employees are saying, I'm not getting any feedback. And so I think HR tools can actually help you decipher that a little bit more and clarify that. And so I think what we're seeing is this ability with this data to be able to say, okay, well, this is how we want to prioritize. These are the things we're working on, and this is what our employees and people are actually saying, and really be able to make real impact.
Well, to close, can you tell us a little bit about how Leapsome's platforms can help HR leaders remain agile and help them reevaluate their workflows from the ground up?
Absolutely. Obviously, we're a little biased, but Leapsome has really become the fabric and inner workings of how we work internally, which makes sense. But why is that the case? I think it's because things like being able to celebrate and praise someone very easily is there. And so you get to like shout out someone, but also everyone gets to see it and like thumbs up, and you get this like adrenaline rush of being like really proud of the things that you've done. But you also get to record tactical things like, hey, here are the goals we have. How do we measure it? How are we actually doing? And then pulling that into your conversation with your manager to say, okay, this is where we fell short and this is where we need to go. And they're able to kind of track that for you and then pull that very seamlessly into doing your performance review, where you don't have to look back at a bunch of calendars and things. Everything's sort of in the system for you, and then throw in AI on top of that. We have Leapy who can help you really decipher all of that and find what you need to find and really make writing your own review, writing your peer review, all of those things as seamless as possible. And then throw in from an HR perspective, like, hey, how is our team feeling? And you can get that sentiment with our surveys. So it really has become a big part of how we work and flow together as a global organization. And that's what we want to bring for our customers as well.
Look, thank you so much for sharing your insights. This has really been enlightening and informative, and I really appreciate you having this conversation with me. It makes me think about the future and all the possibilities.
Thank you so much, Sonia.
And with that, we've reached the end of today's programming. Special thanks to you, our audience, for tuning in. Look out for future HR Brew events. And in the meantime, we'll see you in the newsletter.